Now, global tensions are rising sharply as China takes an increasingly assertive stance against the United States over the strategic Strait of Hormuz, signaling what analysts see as a calculated test of American resolve. Hello, my name is Ashutosh Srivastav and I bring you the best from home and abroad. At the center of the standoff is the Strait of Hormuz, one of the world's most critical energy choke points. Nearly a fifth of global oil supply passes through this narrow corridor, making it vital not just for regional players but for the entire global economy, especially energy-dependent nations like China. The crisis escalated after the United States, under President Donald Trump, imposed a naval blockade targeting vessels linked to Iranian ports. The move is aimed at cutting off Iran's oil exports followed failed diplomatic talks. The US military's CENTCOM has made it clear that the blockade will be strictly enforced, warning that any threatening vessels could be neutralized. But China's response has been swift and unusually direct. China's Defense Minister Zhang Dongjun openly warned Washington not to interfere in Beijing's trade relations with Iran. He emphasized that Chinese ships will continue operating in the region all the same, asserting that Iran controls access to the strait and that it remains open for navigation. This is where the situation becomes particularly significant. China is not merely reacting, it is actively testing the limits of American or US power. By continuing to send vessels through a blockaded zone, Beijing is challenging whether Washington is willing to enforce its threat against the world's second largest economy. This creates a high-stakes game of brinkmanship. A key example is the movement of the tanker Rich Sari, a vessel linked to Chinese interests and previously sanctioned by the US. The ship initially turned back as the blockade began, only to attempt passage again shortly after, effectively probing how far the United States is willing to go. If the US allows such vessels through, it risks appearing weak. If it stops or confronts them, it risks direct escalation with China. This dynamic reflects a broader strategic pattern. China has increasingly adopted a more confrontational posture globally, whether in the South China Sea, Taiwan Strait, or now in the Middle East. In each case, it pushes boundaries incrementally, gauging responses and exploiting hesitation. The stakes here are particularly high because of energy security. China depends on the Strait of Hormuz for nearly 40% of its oil and a significant portion of its natural gas. Any disruptions threaten its economic stability. By asserting its right to operate freely, Beijing is signaling that it will not allow US sanctions to dictate its energy lifelines. At the same time, China is positioning itself diplomatically. While issuing warnings, it has also called for peace talks through its foreign ministry, projecting itself as both a stakeholder and a mediator. This dual approach, assertive on the ground, diplomatic on the surface, allows China to expand its global influence while challenging US dominance. For the United States, this presents a difficult dilemma. Enforcing the blockade strictly could escalate into a direct confrontation with China, something Washington has long sought to avoid. But backing down or selectively enforcing it could weaken US credibility, not just in the Middle East, but globally among allies and adversaries alike. Now, adversaries are also a problem. The broader implication is clear. This is no longer just about Iran or oil shipments. It is about the shifting balance of global power. If this confrontation intensified, it could open yet another front in an already strained geopolitical landscape, adding to existing tensions in Europe and the Indo-Pacific. Multiple simultaneous flashpoints increase the risk of miscalculation, where even a small incident like the interception of a tanker could spiral into a much larger conflict. In essence, China's actions in the Strait of Hormuz are a strategic test. It is probing how far it can go, how firmly the United States will respond, and what space exists to reshape the global order in its favor. As ships continue to move through one of the world's most sensitive waterways, the question now is not just about trade, but about power deterrence and who sets the rules in an increasingly contested world. Thank you for watching.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.